Hey there, friends. This is Bill MacDonald, the writing doctor. Welcome to today's emergency room, editing and revising. We're going to work on one question today and one only. It got 33% correct in Texas on the fourth grade test. And I think what we need to realize is the editing questions that we're going to get as field tested items in third through eighth are not as difficult as they seem to be made out to be by a lot of teachers. If you're new to writing, the editing and revising portion of it, then it'll be really important to watch this one because there's just three simple rules to follow when it comes to what you're supposed to do when you have an editing question. And I'm going to show you what to do and how to do it so that we won't have 33%, one out of three students get a question correct when all it was a basic cups question. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. It was question number 23. And for those of you that are not familiar with my strategies, I believe in rules, whether we're doing reading, writing, revising, editing, or math, rules. Make sure you read the question and the problem or the passage, underline and label in both places, evaluate and execute your strategies, then eliminate and explain your wrong answers, and select one. Now, we could cover these up so that we can practice just looking at sentence 34, but there's a reason why I want to show you the answer choices, because if kids had enough trouble with this question, with all the answer choices being there and all they had to do was pick one, it's going to be even harder when it becomes open-ended. Okay, so the question says, what change should be made in sentence 34? What I've done is I've underlined change. When you read the question, it's better to read it softly on a testing format and softly in the passage as well. I put brackets so that when we go back to the passage, we can highlight, yes, sentence 34, but instead of telling your kids to underline sentence 34, I would suggest you have them put an opening and a closing bracket, because what they're saying is the mistake, and there is one because it doesn't say make no change. The mistake is somewhere inside 34, but the students had to notice something in the paragraph, not just sentence 34. So when you see the word change, that's what I call rule number one. So I'm going to show those of you that have the writing folder, when it says what change in a sentence, you'll underline the word change and you'll label, you'll make a bracket with cups. And most of you already have cups with one P and one S. That means that the mistake that we're going to find is either capitalization, usage, subject verb agreement, using Spider-Man to connect his subject and his predicate with a web, what we used to call diagramming, punctuation, knowing when we have red stop signs. Think of every sentence like a street that has a stop sign at the end. So You could have your students draw on blank sheets of paper or in their writing journals or binders a red period, exclamation and question mark, make them very large, and you could make statements and your students could hold up the correct stop sign. Notice that the rest of the punctuation is yellow. We're not going to stop the sentence. We're just going to slow it down with a comma, an apostrophe contraction in the upper grades, a colon or a semicolon, or a set of quotation marks when someone starts to talk and when they finish talking. And if you think of it this way, in front of the mouths of some children and adults, you'll see dimples, and you'll see a set of dimples on the other end of their mouth. So we could call it the opening and closing dimples. Now I want you to notice the word said in red. That's going to be called the tag, that someone is saying something, whoever the person is will be mentioned, or their pronoun, and a said word, which is called the tag whenever you're having dialogue. Now, if you put the tag first, it's pretty cool that you'll say, so-and-so said, comma, quotation, capital, a cap, three c's that happen right in a row when you're having dialogue, whatever they said, closing, close the street, and quotation. Five c's that happen when you have dialogue, and it's all right there. Why are they yellow? Because you're slowing the sentence down. Why is this one red? Because you're stopping the sentence. Now, if you say the thing first and then put the tag afterwards, then you would have a comma right there, or an exclamation or a question mark if something was being asked, and then you would have said so-and-so or whatever said word is used. But just so you can see, rule number one on the folders is underline the word change and put cups. The one that we'll get into on the next video are two questions involving when it says, what is the correct way? Whether it's to write a sentence or correct way to write sentences. And so we'll look at that in the next video, and I'll do that one today as well. So you can see what's the difference between when a question says change and when a question has the keywords correct or best instead. So before we get into the passage itself, those of you, many of you who have needed a graphic organizer have used mine, and it's editing PE. We all have PE at our school, but kids are not good at PE, at editing P passages or E essays. Before we can learn how to edit a passage, we need to learn how to edit a paragraph and edit a sentence with the correct beginning, middle, and end. So because it said change, it's the first four fingers in the graphic organizer. C for capitalization, where you underline capitals, proper nouns, and titles, and first words. U is for usage. For Spider-Man, is the subject singular, one finger, or is it plural? Is the verbs simple or compound? Is it compound predicate or a simple predicate? And then his shoes are red. So what stop sign do you need after connecting his subject to his predicate? The red arrow, is it past? The yellow arrow, is it present tense? And the green arrow, is it future tense? That's when you know how to use subject verb agreement usage the best. And if you ask me, should I teach that at the beginning? No. Teach words spelling first, then teach capitalization phrases, then teach sentences with punctuation. Then you can teach usage. And after that, we can worry about that other letter that has to do with run-ons and fragments. The S is, real quick, the P is for punctuation. So is it a stop sign, punctuation, period, exclamation, question mark? I'm going to put a T for table. Do we slow down a little bit and we can bounce an imaginary ball on the table for a comma, a colon, or a semicolon, or we can toss a ball up in the air for an apostrophe, contraction, or the opening and closing quotations before and after you speak. Okay. If we have the stop sign punctuations, since Spider-Man's feet are on the floor, then you could bounce your imaginary ball or a real ball when you're practicing on the floor for these kind of punctuations. And the other kind of cups mistake is spelling, where you practice seeing the word, taking a picture of it, saying the word, pronouncing the syllables, chunking it, hearing and listening to the sounds and what you don't hear, the silent letters, using your brain to think and process the spelling of the word. And there's a lot of conversation about phonetics, phonics versus spelling. And I think both are important, but they're going to call it spelling, your ability to take a picture or to record a video of what a word sounds like, and using this be your brain to know if the word is spelled correctly or incorrectly, or this be your book, your dictionary, so you can find out the correct spelling and hopefully write the right answer. Okay. The only other one that we're not going to talk about today is P for penmanship. Iron Man is print. When you write on a piece of paper in print, if you look at my fingers, no fingers are touching, so that's called print. When you type on a computer, it's typed in print. So we make sure that we put no space between words, but we put a little space between our letters, and then we put space between sentences, and that would be correct penmanship. Aquaman, he closes his hand so he can swim faster. That's cursive, and it's fine to teach cursive when we have the paper and pencil version, but pretty soon we'll be typing everything. And so I suggest that you concentrate more on print to get them ready for the transition to typing out your answers with correct spacing between letters, words, and sentences. Okay, so that's how you use the CUPS graphic organizer. Reminder, it says we're going to look at sentence 34. It said change capital and to and. And so we're going to label C for capitalization. Why would we get rid of that capital? We'll find out. Change of, how it sounds, to off. That's called usage because they're used in two completely different ways. So it's not a past, present, future. It's just how is the word OF or OFF being used in the sentence. One of them is correct. If there's nothing wrong with the way it's being used, then of course we would eliminate letter B. Letter C says insert a comma after capital Colorado, capital river. So I've gone ahead and put a comma there, and I'm going to call that P for punctuation, as we mentioned in the hand. And you can see it also as a reminder on the putting commas is P for punctuation. And finally, insert quotation marks after the comma. Okay, so there'll be a comma somewhere in sentence 34, and they're going to say quotation marks. And so I had mentioned to you that when someone talks, you either put the tag with the comma and then the quotation, or you have them talk and then you put the comma, the quotation, and the tag at the end. Okay, so the correct answer is letter D. Insert the quotation marks. And what I want you to notice that when we go look at the sentences, even though they were asking about sentence 34, the person, the character in the passage started talking not in sentence 34 or 33, but started talking in sentence 32. So his opening dimples were way over here. And they even let us know in the front of sentence 32 that someone's about ready to open their mouth. And we're going to get to hear the exact words that come out of their mouth for 3 consecutive sentences. So we need opening and closing quotation marks, what we might call opening and closing dimples. So I've gone ahead and labeled inside the passage the letters A, B, C, and D. So you can help your students. And somebody asked me, Mr. McDonald, do your folders work just for 4th grade? Are they for elementary? Are they for middle school or high school? No, they work for everybody. It's the same rules, regardless of what grade level that you're teaching in reading. When they give you an editing question, you just have to look for the word change and write cups, look for the word correct, and it's either a run-on or a fragment or a combination of a fragment and a sentence, which we'll get into when that time comes. Letter A, they said change capital and to lowercase and. Now, some of you were not aware about this, but yes, we don't like to start sentences with and, but if you put your finger over the word and you say the rest of the sentence, it is because of the Colorado River and the caves down below, comma, Marcos explained, period. Because that makes sense on its own, you're allowed to have a sentence start with the word and, because there's still an independent clause as part of the rest of the phrase. So I'm going to eliminate letter A right here before I even go back to the question. B said change of belonging to something to off versus off and on. And it's because capital, it is because off the Colorado River and the caves down below, comma, Marcos explained, period. We weren't talking about on and off the thing. We weren't getting off of the river. We might go in the river, but that wasn't our letter choice. Now, I want you to think of my head as the word and as I'm reading, and these 2 lines as extensions of my hand. So if you watch me in the video and listen to me read, I'm going to bob my head when I get to the word and, so you can see why C is the wrong answer. Capital, it is. So I toss a ball up in there because it's up there. Separate it from is, because of the Colorado River and the caves down below. Because it was only because of 2 things, we don't need a comma there for commas in a series. And I want you to notice, I have to go back and let you see that almost half of the students tried to put a comma after the Colorado River. And for some reason, someone is teaching kids, every time you see the word and, put a comma right in front of it. No, it's only if it's the last, right before the last item in a series. So when we only have 2 things, Colorado River and caves, because that's only 2 things, we would only join them with the word and, not a comma. So we are going to eliminate letter C. Now, as I told you, in D, there's going to be a comma there and they want to put quotation marks. That means what they're saying is somebody is finished talking. Well, there's the person's name and there's their said word, what we called the tag. And so we're going to have to rewind. Eat, eat, eat. Did they start talking here? Let's find out. It's because there were so many plants and animals living there. And no, they continued talking. Look all the way back to sentence 31. Marcos spoke up to help. Quotation, capital. So he has his opening dimples way back here on sentence 32. He doesn't stop talking until the end of sentence 34, where they don't say, Marcus doesn't say, I explained. No, that's the reader, the writer letting us know who's the person doing the talking and what said word did they use so we can know in what way it was spoken. So the answer to this question was letter D, because if you look at Mr. Potato Head down below, Marcos, the person that's speaking, started talking in sentence 32, had a period to pause for a second. Sentence 32, he kept talking. It wasn't his beginning or his ending talking, but we do have another stop sign. And finally, he said his third sentence, did his stop talking, and then we put the comma, and then we let the reader know that sorry, I gotta put the comma on the inside. I want to make sure we see that visibly correct, because we put the tag, the Marcos, and the explain part on the outside, and so we make sure that the comma is on the inside. So I know that's kind of corny, but Mr. Potato Head does have a mouth, and it's not just for tasting things for the senses. He can use it for talking, and so that's the teachable moment to use dialogue. So when we come back to our answer choices, and this would be a great one to practice when you're doing reading. Whenever someone is talking during a passage or reading passage that has a story, you might want to see how many sentences the character is talking and do a teachable moment where you talk to your kids about how many mouths will be drawn for that character. So we eliminated because and covered up with our finger, still created an independent clause. We weren't getting off of anything. There were only two things being written about the Colorado River and a cave. And because we were talking for 3 sentences in a row, we would put our closing quotation marks. So when you say only read the sentence, that's great, but you're not going to know unless you pay attention that there was a said word and a person, a tag right there. And so the only way you would know, unless you read sentences 31, 32, and 33, would be that your understanding of tags means that there needs to be quotation marks when the person's done speaking. So we would eliminate A, B, and C. We would select letter D. If we're going to practice bubbling on paper and pencil, we can go ahead and fill that in. And then to make sure whether it's on a computer or in paper, or computer. Let's make sure that our 23D for odd matches our 23D in the Scantron. Okay, so we did cite some evidence by selecting, we highlighted text, and we couldn't just look at that sentence. In this case, it was better to look at the whole paragraph so that you could see when the appropriate closing quotation marks were supposed to be made. So there you have it. If you teach reading, this is a great supplemental tool to add to your teaching toolbox. A lot of you are familiar with reading skills, but I could teach all of those 4 mistakes, those incorrect and correct errors, doing reading by killing 2 birds with 1 stone, talking to your kids about subject verb agreement, about proper nouns, about compound predicates versus simple predicates. When the character is only doing one thing, the same thing happens when there's a compound subject. If there's only if two people, Bill and Maria, are doing one thing, then I don't need a comma there either. I just need to join Bill to Maria with the word and. So please share and tag your reading and writing teacher friends. That's our surgery for today. Goodbye, reading and writing doctors. My next video will be how to use rule number 2. What is the correct way to write a sentence? And another one will be the same because there were 2 questions regarding that. So I want to show you the difference. So if you're watching this one, kind of scroll up and watch the second one and the third one that's going to come right after.